Today, I want to talk about something that shows up a lot in therapy, particularly when someone is contemplating leaving a relationship or noticing this pattern of choosing the same type of toxic relationship over and over. We're going to look at a case example of a woman named Joy, and she represents a lot of individuals with this story and an issue we'll talk about called repetition compulsion. We're going to talk about why it happens, what it actually takes to break the pattern, and why it matters if you have complex PTSD or childhood trauma. If you're new to my channel, my name is Adele Derakiddo, and I'm a licensed psychotherapist and a coach, and I like to talk about intense emotional experiences like limerence and CPTSD, better known as childhood trauma, and how it impacts our ability to love. And also, I like to talk about parasocial relationships in a world of AI. If you're interested in any of those topics, please consider subscribing. So, like I said, Joy is a fictional character that we are going to be looking at when talking about repetition compulsion. This is just a case example to illustrate what the issues can look like when we trace it back. I just want to put a disclaimer out there. I'm not diagnosing anyone. What you can gain from this video is a self-reflection if her story resonates with you. Joy is a 34-year-old woman who came into therapy hoping to work on depression and anxiety. When we dug a little deeper, I learned that these symptoms she felt were triggered mostly by her romantic relationship. For a whole year, she was overworked and sleep deprived, all because her partner had been unemployed. What I come to learn is that with her fiancé, Troy, it is Troy who is struggling with alcoholism. And it seemed that the more we talked about it, it wasn't the first time she'd been in this kind of dynamic. In fact, if we were to trace her history all the way back to previous partners, Joy tends to be in relationships with those with whom she has to take care of. She becomes their emotional anchor, and at times like an emotional punching bag. And when we looked even deeper, we found that her father also struggled with addictions. He eventually left the family for another woman, and her mom became quite depressed. That's when Joy had to step up at the age of 11 and take care of her mom and her younger siblings. So even though it seemed that Troy wasn't like her father in the beginning when they first met, over time, the same themes began to surface. And that's what's very common about repetition compulsion. This unconscious choosing of a partner. Joy would repeatedly find herself taking care of someone who wasn't emotionally available, putting her needs aside, feeling responsible. Throughout childhood, she learned that if she took care of everything and made sure other people were okay, that she would be okay. Joy shared that she always had this fantasy that if only her dad stayed, things would have been better and they would have been happier. But this completely overlooks the pain he inflicted on the family. What's important here is that none of this is obvious to a person in the beginning, especially not Joy. Troy didn't appear to be someone who needed caretaking. Of course, it isn't as easy to say that you should leave a person that you love who's going through things like this. But there is certainly patterns that Joy participates in which enables this dynamic. We don't go looking to recreate that pain. Our nervous system and our attachment system often pulls us towards what it knows, even if it isn't good for us. This is what Freud called repetition compulsion. Now, I just want to say that Freud did have a lot of controversial ideas and theories, but repetition compulsion seems to show up in so many ways in psychotherapy.
Besides repeating bad relationships or staying stuck in them, sometimes it's pushing healthy people away because it just doesn't feel right, like it's too calm or even boring, and we only knew emotional chaos. Or we might feel compelled to earn love to prove our worth because that's what we were taught. Or we test people's love, like start fights, create drama, like without meaning to, just to recreate past volatility.
Repetition compulsion is that unconscious drive to recreate early relationship dynamics in the hope that in time it will turn out differently. It's the mind's way of trying to resolve something that was unfinished. Repetition compulsion has shown to be quite true when we look at trauma, especially when we look at the attachment perspective. It validates that our early experiences teach us what love feels like, whether that's taking care of others before yourself or having inconsistency and instability, or even proving your worth to the person you love. We just keep gravitating towards relationships that feel familiar, even at our own expense, because it is hardwired in our nervous system and our attachment system, even if we say we want something else. In Joy's case, we see that there are certain qualities she's drawn to. She's drawn to people who need help, who seem strong at first, but eventually lean on her in very unhealthy ways. These dynamics mirror emotional roles that she had in childhood, not because she wants to repeat them, but because they feel familiar, predictable, and what feels predictable and familiar feels safer for the nervous system. I would add that she also is drawn to people who are emotionally unavailable. Troy may be a very loving and generous person, but when you have an addiction that you are not coping with, you are in active recovery of some kind, relationally, you are emotionally unavailable to show up in healthy ways for the people that you love.
Joy is familiar with this role of putting her own needs aside to respond to someone else's pain. It doesn't always mean she likes it, but it's all she knows. She doesn't want to quote unquote give up.
Now, I want to bring up another important part of this that creates some tension, which is the role of secondary gain. Joy came to therapy because she wanted to feel better in her relationship, but she also didn't want to lose it. So if she begins to do the work in therapy, what might happen is she will see the patterns clearly, which means that she might have to make the difficult decision of letting the relationship go altogether. And that comes with grief and fear and uncertainty and change, everything that feels dangerous to the nervous system. That's kind of the messed up thing about all of this, is that sometimes staying in a toxic dynamic gives us a false sense of control. It gives us a familiar identity. It lets us keep believing that if we just try harder, love will work out, that we can be the exception to this issue.
Or she may have to confront the grief and abandonment wounds, which she never fully sat with. She's stuck in the magical thinking.
And they'll want to get better because of us. The people can only get better through their own willingness. And if you find yourself in a situation like Joy, more likely than not, your staying enables the pattern. So to break free from this toxic dynamic, there are a few things that you might be able to do and that I've seen helped clients like Joy. Of course, it's important first and foremost to get professional help. both for you and for your partner. For Joy, she has to realize her limits. You're not responsible for someone else's recovery or for their choices. Even though she grew up feeling responsible for everyone in her family when her dad left, it doesn't mean that as an adult, she has to sacrifice herself now. She has to learn to say no without guilt. Although I think you can still say no and feel guilty at the same time. You can still say no and still care at the same time, also. You can still love someone and say no at the same time. It doesn't mean that you're abandoning someone, it means that you're protecting yourself and ultimately protecting them, allowing them that chance to get better because you're no longer there to be that emotional punching bag, to be the only one carrying the weight of that relationship. The next thing is this idea of detaching with love, which sounds in contradiction with one another. To detach and love just means that you are emotionally stepping back, giving that person the autonomy and the space to become independent. You drowning is not going to save them. Practically speaking, it's so important to prioritize your self care. Think about what helps you feel grounded, what brings you back to your body, to your present reality, who reflects back to you your strengths, who knows you the best. Surround yourself with those people, surround yourself with those kinds of activities. Nurture yourself and don't lose contact with the outer world. A lot of the times when people are in relationships of this type, they tend to make their world smaller. Even if their world isn't necessarily small and there's a lot of people within their community, it seems only very few people know the truth behind their facade.
Joy came to understand that her fear wasn't just about being abandoned, it was also about being alone. She had clung to relationships, even ones where she had to do all the caretaking just to avoid that emptiness. But she also learned true relationships feel better when both people are emotionally available. Through her healing, she also let go of the painful belief that as a little girl, she could have done something to change her father's decision.
It takes a lot for someone like Joy to realize that setting boundaries isn't selfish. Choosing your well being and happiness doesn't make you a bad person. But Joy grew up in a home where she didn't have that choice, where love meant responsibility and self sacrifice. But now, as an adult, she has a choice, and you do too. If you resonate with Joy's story and the qualities of repetition compulsion, I invite you to take a moment and ask yourself, what kind of people are you drawn to? Are there patterns in your relationships that show up over and over again? And last, what are these patterns trying to tell you? These patterns aren't about weakness, it's about examining the unconscious parts of us, our desires, and our needs, and coming back to who we truly are. You don't have to keep repeating the past, but that also means you take that risk of choosing something less familiar and perhaps more uncomfortable, but ultimately something healthier and something that actually makes you feel whole. The first and most important step is awareness. If you liked what you were watching, please feel free to subscribe, leave a comment. I'd love to hear your thoughts about your own reflections, and I'll see you guys next time.